From presidential candidates visiting the Low Country to affordable housing, I speak exclusively with State Representatives Marvin Pendarvis and J.A. Moore for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And listen to this interview later on the free Quintin's Close-Ups iHeartRadio podcast. Gentlemen, it's so good to see you.
Man, it's so good to see you again.
Always, man. It's been a while.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm good, great. We're sitting here in your new Park Circle offices.
Thanks, sir. It's good to be here.
Yeah. I know you've been here since January.
That's right.
What is the biggest difference between January and now?
January now, well, it's not too much. I mean, getting settled in here. Excited to be here. We've got, a law office here, satellite office that, myself and another one of my colleagues have been able to run, but also a legislative office. And so it's given me an opportunity to really have a presence for the first time here in the district. For many people, this is the heartbeat of House District 113 right here on the East Mountain View corridor. And right here where you've got a lot of retail establishment, restaurants, you've got a high school across the way. Right. So a lot is coming here, a lot is moving here, and I'm glad to be around the people that not only elected me, but people who are doing some things that I really want to be a part of.
And what are those things that you want to be a part of right now?
Well, I'm about growth. I'm about smart growth. I'm about seeing North Charleston realize its fullest potential. And I'm a product of this place, a place that's given me a lot of opportunities. But I also think that there's a lot to be desired in what we can be. And this area, I think, is going to be the epicenter of what the future of this region is going to be like when it comes to transit, when it comes to affordable and workforce housing, when it comes to economic development that can lead to jobs and opportunity. So there's a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot of potential here, and I'm excited about the potential to be a part of it.
I got to go to you because he just talked about something that's always been talking about right now in the news. That is affordable housing, workforce housing.
Yes.
How do you define that?
Well, I mean, I think that Quintin will. It's tough to define that because what's affordable to you may be not affordable to me or affordable to someone else. So I think there's obviously federal and state standards of what affordability looks like. And so I think in order to solve this affordable housing crisis, we have to look at it from so many different fronts. We have to look at it from an educational front. We need to make sure that people are ready for the jobs that are coming here in South Carolina, because a part of the reason why housing is affordable in this area, because there's a lot of growth that's happening, but people that are from here we're not getting those jobs, those high-skilled, high-paying jobs here in this area, because once we get out of high school and some technical schools, we're not ready for these 21st century jobs. So I think affordable housing and the job market here and education kind of fit all hand in hand. So I think that's a little bit of a difficult answer to answer like what is affordable housing, because I think it's different for different people.
Oh, yes, indeed. And let me stay in North Charleston. Obviously, the talk of town right now is about Senator Kamala Harris.
Yeah, Kamala.
And obviously, you had coffee with her just recently.
Yeah.
What's still place in your mind about that conversation?
Okay, what I found her to be is down to earth. I found her to be a very humble person. There was a number of issues that I spoke to her about. Specifically mental health in schools, making sure that our teachers are paid what they deserve. And we had a really good conversation about the two bills that I'm working on, House Bill 3257 and 3258, dealing with mental health awareness and wellness in public schools here in South Carolina. She was very supportive with those bills and gave me some really good insight on how to navigate it from a political standpoint. There's still a lot that I want to ask her, dealing with criminal justice reform, her previous record as when she was in as an attorney general and as a solicitor in California. But I found her to be very, very engaging. She seemed to be a person who was sure of themselves, which I enjoyed. And then after our coffee, she went over to Royal Baptist church, which is close by here, and I tell you, she went to church. I mean, she went to church, and she did a really good job of telling her story. What was important to her vision for America. So I'm interested to. This won't be my first interaction with her, nor will it be Representative Pendarvis. So I'm excited to get to know her better, ask her some tough questions, and also talk to other candidates, because I think it's important that as an elected officials that we give each candidate that's running for president adequate time, ask them questions, get to know them as people, because we don't just represent ourselves and self-interest, but we represent tens of thousands of people. So I'm interested and excited to get to know her more. She did a great job while she was here, but there's a lot more folks to come.
I'm going to ask you some tough questions in a moment. It's Quintin's close up.
Yeah, you got to, man. Yeah.
But I know Representative Pendarvis, you were at the town hall meeting as well.
That's right. That's right.
When the senator comes back to town, what more questions do you want to ask her?
Well, one of the things that I latched on, and I was telling my boy over here the same thing, is she sent a powerful message to South Carolina that when she runs, she's going to run on a platform of speaking truth to power.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was a message that resonated throughout her entire speech. She said on numerous occasions, let's speak truth. And so my question to her when she comes back, and we have that opportunity to discuss further, is, how do those truths look? How does that look for the future of the United States, particularly looking at our affordable housing crisis across the country? She introduced an interesting piece of legislation that I was very intrigued with the Rent Relief Act.
Yeah.
I believe it could be one of the more revolutionary kinds of legislation that this country has ever seen, particularly in the area of housing. It's so much so that I introduced a state bill, the South Carolina Rent Relief Act. So I would like to get her thoughts on that. I think that's a conversation that we've not had here in this country, in this state, dealing with housing. It's an issue that she's recognized early on, and one that I'd love to pick her brain about. But I'd also just want to talk to her about her vision for what we could do in the aftermath of Trump.
Mm-hmm.
If it's her that takes the office in January of 2021, how does that look after 4 years of Trump? And what do we do to get this country back on the right track and getting it back to representing the core values of all Americans? And not the divisiveness that we've seen that's attempted to tear this country apart and divide us for the last 4 years. And so that would be my message to her, not only one of what the future of America looks like, but also how we repair ourselves and really get back to restoring the hope that so many people have had in this country.
Let me stay on housing, because you sent this press release out recently. It says this as a headline: Representative Marvin Pendarvis announces revolutionary overhaul to South Carolina residential landlord tenant bag. Why now?
It's past time. We know we've got a crisis here in South Carolina. Last April, Princeton University released a study that showed that North Charleston was #1 for eviction rates in the entire country. That's problematic. In fact, in 2017, there were 10 evictions filed per day in this entire country. That's bad. Columbia wasn't too far behind with being #8. And so the question becomes, how did we get to this point? And Congressman Clyburn held a town hall last summer to discuss this in some detail. And so I started to look into it, research it myself, talk with different colleagues and different groups that are interested in it. And what we found is the laws that we have here in South Carolina have really been landlord friendly for a long time. The Landlord Tenant Act goes back to the last being substantial update in 1986. We haven't done anything since then. And in fact, if there's been any updates, it's only to try to strengthen the protections for landlords. Now, granted, this isn't to give tenants any pass, but at the same time, they need some protections, particularly when you are dealing with situations where you've got absentee landlords or slumlords who don't who don't care about the property, who don't have the intent to keep it in good repair and keep it in the condition that's going to be beneficial to someone's health and safety. Tenants need protection. Tenants need the ability to apply some of the deductions or the repairs that they may have to undertake themselves if the landlord has been negligent in performing their duties, and apply to their rent. And it's a problem, and it's one that I recognize, and that's what this bill aims to do.
And personally, how many people have you heard from as far as stories like this?
Oh, countless. In fact, I can recall a conversation of a young woman who sent me some pictures of an apartment complex that she had been living in. And what's tragic about this situation is there had been mold in this apartment complex in several corners of the place. Now, she's got a young son, and that has caused respiratory issues with him for several months. Right? In fact, to the point where it's necessitated that they go undertake medical treatment. Now, that can be an issue when you've got someone who's on a limited income, limited transportation. So how often can you get to the doctor, if you can get there at all? And also, how often can you afford to really take off of work to be able to take care of these things that a landlord should be taking care of? She had let the landlord know, she had notified him on numerous occasions, but he didn't answer. She had performed her duty as required by law, right? She sent a certified letter. She gave him time to respond. It fell on deaf ears to the point where she had no choice. But the law did not provide her an out. All she could do was try to leave, but again, the waiting list could be 3 months to 6 months long. So what can she do at that point? You're on limited income, you're limited transportation, and you got a wait list to get to some other apartment complex that could be 3 months long. You're trapped in a cycle of poverty that you can't escape, and the law doesn't provide you any kind of opportunity to get out of it. And so this bill is to aim to protect people like her, to address landlords that have created a situation that she was in, that are neglectful of their duties to provide a house that's, or an apartment that's in good repair, and that's not something that's going to be detrimental to someone's health or safety.
And it was interesting in this particular release, it says this, quote, among the key proposed changes to the law, one amendment would allow a tenant to make repairs and deduct the cost from the rent.
Yes.
In the event a landlord has failed to make repairs.
Yes.
Such deductions from the rent are currently prohibited. Now, how much repairs can that person make?
Great question, and it's one that I fielded since I did my press conference. So, a couple of things. When the bill's enacted, when the law's enacted, someone can only claim up to a $500 deduction on their rent or half of 1 month's rent, whichever is greater. We don't want situations where people are abusing it, obviously. We want to make sure it's for situations that are going to be critical to someone's health and safety. So it's not any cosmetic issues if you don't like the way this paint is and you ask your landlord to paint it over and he hasn't done anything. But if you got flooding in your house or some leaks, some electrical issues, some wiring issues, some mold, some mildew, something that's going to be detrimental to your health or safety or your children, you should be able to do that. And so as long as you sent in the proper notice to the landlord and they've not responded, you'll be able to take advantage of this law. And if it's a situation where a landlord is continuously doing this, well, then obviously that's something that you'll be able to benefit from. But at some point, then that's when you'll be able to step in, and the city will be able to step in and say, this landlord, obviously you don't need to be running this premises because you demonstrated yourself to be negligent, derelict, and not someone who's becoming of holding this property.
The eviction process. What part of the process do you still have questions about right now?
Well, my bill aims, in addition to the repair and deduct, it does a lot to streamline the process. In my conversations with a number of housing groups, what came out is that, one, we've got to provide better access to the courts for tenants. Now, this bill doesn't address it, but eventually we're going to have to get to a point where we're providing tenants with attorneys. That's just the reality. Because if you look at it, most of the tenants who are in eviction court, they're not represented by an attorney, but the landlords are. And so generally when you're pro se like that, which means without an attorney, you're not going to really be well versed in the law and the language to be able to properly defend yourself. And so, most of the time they're losing their cases and they're becoming evicted. So that's generally what a lot of the improvements to the bill does, is to try to streamline that process to access to the courts, but also is clarifying and defining some of the things in the statute. But again, it's been a long time since there's been any substantive updates to the act. And so we need to do a better job of clearly defining some of the roles and responsibilities of landlords and tenants alike, and making sure they understand exactly what their duties are, and when certain things are triggered within the statute. And so a lot of it is just streamlining, but also cleaning up some of the things that have not been taken any real attention to for a long time.
Maybe turn to mental health. This is quoting WCBD.com. Studies show 1 in 5 people are impacted by some sort of mental illness, with 17% of high school teens considering suicide. What are the types of mental illness right now for high school students really in this particular district?
You know, well, it's all over South Carolina, all over the country. It's everything from anxiety to depression to sexual assault trauma, that postpartum stress. There's a number of different issues, Quintin, and I think what a lot of us realize is that it affects all of us. Mental health challenges doesn't know race, it doesn't know sexual orientation, it doesn't know socioeconomic levels. It affects all of us. It impacts all of us, and it's an epidemic here in South Carolina. We rank, as far as suicide rates, we're well over the national average. The national average is, I think, if I remember correctly, like 12.65% per 100,000 people. In South Carolina, it's like 14.05% per 100,000 people. That's an epidemic. And so it's just important that we are aware of those numbers and that we do everything we can to mitigate it as early as possible.
And I know also when you were speaking with Senator Harris, you basically discussed the importance of taking care of our students and paying our teachers more. How do you take care of students right now in 2019?
Well, I think mental health is a big part of it. I think creating a culture in school that's conducive for learning. And also making sure that we, and I think it's hand in hand. Okay. I think by making sure that our teachers are paid appropriately based on the professionals that they'll perform better. The environment in which students are able to learn is better because teachers are, feel that they're being appreciated. And so, I just think it's just important. I think that's how you do it. I think that those two kind of go hand in hand. The mental health piece, paying teachers more, it helps with the overall culture and environment in which learning can happen better.
How much more are you talking as far as paying these teachers?
I think at a minimum, Quintin, it needs to be 10%. And to be honest with you, if you look at where we are as far as the national average and where we are as far as the southeastern average, 10% really isn't enough. Especially if we're talking about retention and recruitment, that number really needs to be close to like 15 to 20%. And I know that seems radical, but when we're talking about revolutionizing and reforming the educational system, we have to be radical. I think we have to push the limits. And I don't really think asking the General Assembly and the state to pony up 20% is really asking that much. I think the teachers deserve it. They've shown their value. So I think at a minimum, I think the starting negotiation would be 10% with a goal of 15 to 20%.
Let me turn to Muhyiddin Dibaha. It's been 1 year since he's passed away during a tragedy in New Orleans. What is the biggest memory of him in your mind right now?
Oh man, so many. My good friend. Well, I'll tell you one of my favorite memories is actually, if I can I give two?
Sure.
So one of my favorite memories actually is one that got me really started on this path to where I'm at now. I recall it was July, right after Manual 9.
Right.
And we were in Liberty Park. there was a house that was being renovated, but someone had let us use it to meet. And a number of community activists actually got together, and we were in this house. It was a hot summer day, and we met to discuss what the next steps were. And I remember Muhyiddin standing up and talking about the need for change in the North Charleston Police Department. Now, that was important because it was the first time that really, for me, as someone who had been there but hadn't really been involved on the political scene or the community activism scene, had seen someone become vocal against the establishment or the status quo or any kind of governmental entity. And you could tell that he was very educated, someone that had done his research, knew what he was talking about, and could articulate himself in a way that was convincing but also inspiring. And it made me want to follow him in a way that I could get more involved, that I could be more vocal about my community, that I could empower my community and the people around me in a way that will inspire them to get involved and to give back in some way. So that was that. And then my second memory with him was one shortly after my election to the House. Right? And he was very excited, but he and I had an opportunity to talk, and it wasn't any face-to-face interaction this time, but we were going back and forth on Facebook Messenger. Right. Because what a lot of people don't remember actually, but right after around 2017, Muhyiddin had gotten into trouble downtown with the flag incident. And I was one of the lawyers along with Gerard Frazier who represented him in that. And so we were talking about some things as we were getting ready to close this case out. And he was just telling me how he was getting ready. He was taking a break because I said, I had seen you in a while, bro. Where you been at? What you been doing? And he just said he had taken a break, and he was getting ready. He was organizing, doing some homework. In fact, that's why he was in New Orleans to get ready to really work on his Build a Block initiative, a Better Block initiative, the group that he had been working with to really see what we could do to coalesce around the idea of community building, of building neighborhoods and building communities one block at a time. In fact, I think it was from the block up. That's what it was called. And so that really got me inspired because it was showing that this guy who had been the forefront of so much activism over the last several years, he had taken a back seat, and it was a different side of him. He was no longer at the forefront, but he was still as much impactful because he was working behind the scenes to really get to the point where he could see some reform in the city. So those are two special memories I have of him.
I tell you that kind of caught me off guard. For me, the first time I met him, I think it was like 2010 or something. That was early on, and it wasn't activism or political. I met him out at we were at a restaurant downtown, and we both were younger people. We had a mutual. It was my business partner and a friend of his that he had went to academic magnets with. When I first met him, and we were at a bar at a restaurant, and here was this guy. We were both in our early 20s, and he was just such an intense person, just focused on making a difference at a very young age, man. And he was just impressive, man. It was, to be honest with you, in that setting was almost too much for me because how we both know how he was, but he was always like that. Even when we were downtown, he was still so focused and so intense. And I left that first interaction with him was that, man, this guy, he left an impression on me. And then I think the next time that I can recall when you brought that up was I remember it was at a school board meeting. This now, fast forward right now, it's like, I've known him for years now, probably 2014 or something like that. And it was at a school board meeting. I couldn't remember what the issue was. but I had just met my wife, I had just met Victoria, and it was her first interaction with him. And I already knew what Thomas was when he came up, and she didn't know, and then she left that first interaction with him, and she was just so impressed with him. And me and her had just started dating, so she may have made her so impressed with me that I knew a brother like him.
Right.
And the man, I tell you what, he was just so special. I mean, he was just such a special person, smart and engaging, but he did know how to kind of let his hair down. He did know he was still from Charleston and still enjoyed being alive. And I just tell you what, man, he's one of those people that no matter what happens in our lives, I think all of us that knew him, while he was here, he changed us, made us better people, made us study a little harder, think a little bit more about what's important to us, and be unapologetically activists.
Yes.
And I'm forever grateful for him and for his family. I just, the sacrifice that he had to make in order to be who he was tremendous. A lot of people don't know, like, he made a lot of, financial sacrifices to be who he was. A lot of social sacrifices to be who he was. So I tell you what, man, I wasn't expecting you to ask that, but I tell you, man, he was a very special person. I think so many of us here in Charleston have a fond memory of who he was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's reset. Obviously, you have 2.5 more months left in the legislative session. What exactly do you want to accomplish next for your particular districts?
Well, the list is long. Where do you want to start, right? But on a serious note, I came into year 2 with a very aggressive and progressive agenda. An agenda that was centered around education, economic empowerment, and housing, affordable housing. I think that we've got a real opportunity here in year 1 of a 2-year session to get some of the things that I've been trying to push forward done. In particular, there's some bills that I've got that I believe we'll be able to work on that deal with opportunity zones. House Bill 3186 is a bill that I filed that would give any investor that looks into investing in opportunity zones, which have already been designated by the government, an additional state tax incentive to go ahead and do that. They would get a state tax credit if they go ahead and invest in opportunity zones. And so that's gotten a lot of traction, one that I'm very optimistic about the potential for bipartisan support, and that's something we can get over the finish line. Another bill that I'm excited about, well, before I get to that, the reason why I believe that will be beneficial, I've got a number of opportunity zones in my district. In fact, there's a large part of the South end that's in the town opportunity zone. We look at Core Cherokee, the Academy area, Union Heights. Sure. And so if we look at how we want to revitalize those areas, we've got to be intentional in how we attract business to those areas and creative in the ways that we give incentives for people who are coming to develop in those areas, the backing that they need, but also one that's going to be mindful of the people that are there. So that's why my bill has a community benefits agreement, so that they work in unison with the community to find out what's best for that area. Okay. Another bill that I'm excited about is H3656, we deal with transit. We recognize that we have to be thoughtful in the way we approach transit here in the Low Country. The reason why that's important is because we're approaching rapidly gridlock to a point where we're not going to be able to build, no matter where you stand on the 526 debate, whether it's complete or whether it's not, we're not going to be able to build much more roadway that's going to accommodate all the people that are coming here today. At the last census, it was up to 50 people per day. I imagine by the next census, it'll be more. And so, close to doubling that amount. So people are going to come, and we're not going to be able to accommodate them with at the rate with our infrastructure, at the rate that they're coming here. And so we've got to be non-traditional in the sense of how we build, and we've got to think about transit and alternative forms of transportation. And we've got a bus rapid transit line that's coming here. And we've got to think about how we develop along the corridor of that transit line so that we can see a revitalization in those areas, like a Rivers Avenue corridor, going up to a Lincolnville that could use some attention, or even some of the parts of Somerville. So H3656 deals with transit-oriented development, and also in addition, we've got the complete streets policy, which is something that we've been working with DOT and a number of groups that work on the ability for pedestrians, bikes, bicyclists, and cars to operate a road in harmony, right? To be able to create these pedestrian-friendly roads, these bike-friendly roads, in a way that is more of a community feeling, that's open to all, and that's accepting and conducive to all forms of transportation. So I'm excited about those. And then lastly, well, I can't say lastly, but lastly for purpose of this conversation, because I've got another one, but one of them that I'm extremely excited about is a bill that we've got dealing with inclusionary housing.
Okay.
It's a bill that was introduced by Representative David Mack and my predecessor, Seth Whipper, in the last session. And Senator Marlon Kempton introduced the Senate corollary last session as well. It didn't make it through past the crossover date, but we've got to do something about housing in this area. We've got to incentivize developers that if they're going to come to this area, we've got to give them an incentive to build affordable housing and set aside a certain part of their development for affordable housing, whether that's 20% or 30% or 25% or even not as far as 15%. We want to work with developers. We don't want to force it upon them, but we want to incentivize them, saying if you develop here, if you set aside a certain part of this parcel for affordable housing, we'll give you a density bonus that you need so you can build more. We'll expedite the permitting process so you don't have to wait the traditional 2 years or more, and maybe that can get down to 6 months. And so there are different things that municipalities can work with some of these developers in order to attract affordable housing. We've got to be creative in how we do it, and we've got to be at the forefront as a state, recognizing the issue and doing something about it. And I think if we get behind these pieces of legislation, we will be able to see the kind of benefit for the communities that I'm hopeful of. And for me, that's beneficial for my district, because those areas are areas that are lacking when it comes to, they'll create jobs, they'll create housing, and they'll create a sense of pride for the people who live here. And I think it's going to be the next step into what makes us realize our fullest potential as a city and as a region.
And obviously, he's been in the game for a while as far as being in the House of Representatives. Who is J.A. Moore now?
Well, you know, I tell you what, man. I think number one, I'm a Christian, and I think number two, I'm a husband, and I'm a business owner, and I'm a representative of the people of District 15, and I'm optimistic, man. I'm so encouraged to see the growth of Representative Pendarvis, and we often talk about how it's just incredible to collaborate with each other and to grow with each other. Because the exciting part about it is that it's an opportunity for people in our respective district to see that change can happen, that they can want and desire and demand more from the legislator and the elected officials. And so there's a number of folks, Crystal Simmons and Senator Kempson and Justin Bamberg and Campbell Garvin and Andy McDaniels, and man, the list is long of Shedron Williams, man. I mean, of these new leaders to our state that gives me hope and give me promise, and I'm excited about it, man. There's a number our legal counsel at the State House. They often talk about this year being the most in recent memory, maybe the most in history of number of bills that have been filed. And what that lets me know is that there are people that came to Columbia to work. Yeah. They didn't come to Columbia to go to the cocktail party. The food ain't that good anyway.
Except for Hall.
Yeah, I'm coming to receptions. But the food isn't that good anyway. And but people seem to be focused and dedicated to working in Columbia this year. And I'm, and I feel strongly that it's because of people like Marvin Pendarvis and other folks that are coming in with their sneakers on to run at it and make things happen. So I'm excited about it.
Sneakers on and sleeves up.
That's right. I'm excited, man.
And I know that you talked about how people demand a lot from lawmakers. What are your constituents demanding from you for District 15?
You know what? I really think, to be honest with you, what I've heard more than anything is they want someone that they know will listen to them, and that their voices drive my agenda. I didn't come into this legislative session this year with preconceived notions of I'm gonna be this or I'm gonna be that or I'm gonna be any of those things. I went into it thinking I'm gonna be a person that listens and responds to people. That's where this mental health awareness and wellness came from. It came from constituents having conversations with me meeting with teachers from Berkeley and Charleston County, me meeting with students that go to USC and go to Trident Tech, and not just that piece of legislation, but also the legislation we're working on that we got bipartisan support for closing the Charleston loophole.
That's right.
I mean, we have the chairman of the judiciary in the House who's on as a co-sponsor for this loophole bill, which I'm very, very encouraged about. And so, I'm just listening to people, and I think that's what constituents want. They want to know that their voices are being heard. I had a post today talking about my meeting with Kamala.
Yeah.
And we have folks that live in this area that were commenting about tough questions, if you will. And my response was consistent. It was consistent, is that we represent you all. And just because we don't ask the question that you would like us to ask doesn't mean that we don't care about it. It's, let's work together, let's collaborate, let's talk about what's important to you, and we'll make sure that next time we have opportunity to speak to whomever they are, that we'll have those conversations. So I'm really encouraged, man. My constituents have been just so incredible, so supportive, and they give me so many smart people that I represent. I'm sure Pendarvis feels the same way, man. We got some really smart people, really engaged people that want to make South Carolina and District 15 better.
That is so great to hear.
Yeah.
Well, Representatives Marvin Pendarvis and J.A. Moore, thank you so much for your time.
I think this is a long one, wasn't it? This was good, though, man.
This is good, man. Always a pleasure seeing you.
I'll see you up in Columbia Halls.
That's right.
Who is better at this?